Okay, everybody, let's get started. Thanks for joining today. My name's Trevor Davis. I'm a member of the Azure VMware Solution Global Black Belt team at Microsoft. Today, we're going to cover things from general background info on the solution, just a level set, and then we'll take a deeper dive into the solution, technical, and then also do a live demo and walk through a deployment. So just under a year ago, VMware and Microsoft announced a joint solution. A few months later, in July of 2019, the solution went GA. And since then, there's been tremendous customer demand. I've been working with a lot of customers along the way, and they are definitely having successful adoption, getting good use of the solution. 2 months ago, we announced what we'll just call AVS.next, which is simply the next evolution of Azure VMware solution, which is already GA'd, that we should expect out later this year. So what is Azure VMware solution? We'll get into this in a lot more detail later in the presentation, but simply put, this is a VMware environment on dedicated bare metal Azure infrastructure running inside Azure. So what does that enable you to do? You can then run your VMware workloads natively on Azure. That SDDC that's in Azure is fully supported and maintained by us, Microsoft, and that as well, we'll dive into what that means and where those lines are drawn a bit later. So why Azure VMware solution? First off, you no longer have to wait for services to show up, get rack stacked. As you can imagine, this is a global infrastructure. As such, you get the benefits of that for your VMware workload, Azure VMware solution. Rapid deployment, fast provisioning, no longer needing to wait on those extra hosts, expansion of clusters, things like that. Also, my guess is by the fact that you're attending this UserCon, you work with other folks that are well-skilled in the VMware stack, and those people, when leveraging AVS, can bring those same exact skill sets, same exact tools that they're using. There's no learning curve for administrating this environment running inside of Azure. So, of course, there's a lot of additional benefits that come along with leveraging cloud services by moving these workloads from your data center into Azure and running them on the same platform you do today. You can accelerate that time to modernize your applications by leveraging adjacent Azure services, which may not be accessible or realistic from your current data center environment. What we're seeing is there are services inside of Azure that customers are now able to take advantage of because of the proximity of their vSphere cluster, their VMware workloads to the Azure services. Also, a unique financial benefit to AVS is customers have the ability to leverage their hybrid use benefit. And in addition, those customers, or in addition, I should say, customers who have SQL Server 2008 or Windows Server 2008 still running, that is out of support, and to get extended support, you can either purchase that support or migrate those workloads to Azure. And the fact that AVS is an Azure service, therefore you qualify to get extended support by lifting and shifting those workloads to AVS. So what are we seeing from customers? And obviously everybody's unique, but these are some of the things that we're seeing, which is driving and acting as a catalyst to people get into AVS. There are customers, especially in this situation that we're going through today, that their data center contracts are expiring and they're thinking, do I really want to continue to have to put my people in a position where they need to go to a physical location to tend to infrastructure? So we're seeing customers not renew their data center contracts. End of software support. We just talked about Windows Server, SQL Server 2008. Those expirations of that software support is absolutely driving consumption of these services. Some customers we work with just, hey, they want to get to the cloud, right? That is just a initiative that they have for whatever their reasoning is. Every customer is different, and this is a very quick and easy and low impactful way to move a large portion of your infrastructure to the cloud. Sometimes customers just have capacity needs. They want to expand. They don't want to invest in a hardware refresh. Also, there could be compliance reasons. We're seeing customers come over because they need to tighten up their compliance, security around their environment, and it's easier to do that if they move into a secured Azure environment. And then, of course, business continuity. Have your on-premises data center, you want another VMware environment somewhere else. You don't want to have to maintain that second environment. So we have some unique offerings around leveraging Azure with AVS, Azure VMware solution, and pairing those solutions together to really get you a lot of bang for your buck, and then not having to maintain that secondary data center. Azure VMware solution goes into Azure in what's called an Azure dedicated. What that simply means is that the solution within Azure has dedicated hardware stacks supporting it. VMware is just one in a line of such solutions. I only point that out because it's important for you to know that this type of partner and support model is not new to us at Microsoft. We've been doing this for some time with other companies. And again, VMware is just an additional partner that we're working with in this model. And I can say from the last, or working with this solution since it has GA'd, and with customers, VMware and Microsoft we do have a very streamlined operational model, working with each other and supporting you, the customer. Some of you may be aware, but it's worth highlighting. VMware and Microsoft have the deepest technical relationships compared to all other hyperscalers. We do have a long history of partnering to deliver enhanced solutions and integrate some of the industry-leading technologies. In the networking and security space, we partner in multiple ways: Avi Networks, VeloCloud, NSX Cloud. All these solutions are native Azure integrated. Also, there are IoT integrations with Pulse, Azure, and Azure IoT Edge. On the EUC side of the house, VMware has evolved Horizon Cloud to not only power Azure desktop VMs, but also our Windows Virtual Desktop solution is integrated with Horizon Cloud. Also, Workspace ONE, which many of you I'm sure are aware of, is integrated with Azure Active Directory and Intune to enable endpoint management. So why do I go through this? Simply just to say this is not something new for our organization, right? This is just an evolution of the partnership we already have. And finally, I think this really does highlight the great stuff Microsoft and VMware are doing together. in 2020, we received VMware's Technology Innovation Partner of the Year Award. We'll definitely get into this in a much deeper dive, but at a high level, what is AVS, right? And how does it connect to Azure? So on the left-hand side of the screen, you have your on-premises data center, you have your VMware stack, whatever that is. We have no design that we require as long as you have vSphere vCenter. Typically, a customer will with an express route will connect into Azure. That will be the highway that gets you from on-premises into your AVS private cloud. And on the right-hand side, you see that there is a bare metal VMware SDDC living inside Microsoft Azure, vCenter, vSAN, NSX, HCX. And then adjacent to that is all the other Azure services that you could consume and integrate into this SDDC. So be it you want to leverage databases, you want to use things in Azure to monitor your environment, who knows what, there's so many options there, but the point here is that you have a direct connect across the Azure backbone to all the other Azure services. So what are the service components? Let's kind of dive in a little bit more deeper into what this solution actually is. So at the moment of this presentation, we have 6.7U3 of ESX, vCenter, 6.7 Enterprise, VSAN 2.5 Advanced of NSXT, and HCX R131 Advanced. Obviously, that's going to be ever changing because it's an ever evolving platform that we are taking care of, that you don't have to deal with the upgrades. So, but at the moment, this is what it makes up Azure VMware solution. Hardware specs. I won't go through this in detail. You can easily read it, but definitely a well-equipped servers that are made available to power AVS. All right, I kind of hinted to this before, and this is a question we do get a lot from customers, right? Do I have to maintain my VMware support? The simple answer is no. Those pieces of software that I had shown on the previous screen, that is bundled as part of the AVS platform. So you do not have to maintain your VMware software support, and actually you would not call VMware for this solution. We are your one-stop shop for support. This is just another Azure service like any other Azure service, and for all Azure services you call and you can leverage the same Microsoft support that you have for everything else. If we do need to coordinate something with VMware, we'll do that on the back end, but you will never be the one who has to triangulate these resources. All right, so diving into the details. The hypervisor, obviously, it's vSphere. Runs on bare metal infrastructure. This is not nested virtualization, right? Again, these are bare metal infrastructure nodes. What we call a private cloud, which is a construct within Azure that that your clusters would be deployed into. We can support 4 16-node clusters per private cloud, and that number will be changing over time. But at the moment, 4 16-node clusters per private cloud. You can expand and have multiple private clouds if you needed to. 3-node cluster minimum, so basically 3-node up to 16-node cluster. We talked about this slightly. Host maintenance, lifecycle management, that is all done by us, and we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail in a few slides. But the key thing here is it is without impact to capacity. As we upgrade, as we patch, resources will be added to the cluster, so you don't go without the resources during the patching. And by default, vSphere HA and DRS is enabled on the cluster. Again, this is a vSphere cluster. Same feature functions you have on-prem, you would expect here. So storage, not surprisingly, right? It is a VSAN enabled cluster. So your clusters are full hyperconverged, powered and backed by VSAN. All flash storage, deduplication and compression is enabled. The architecture of the host, 2 disk groups. Each of those disk groups has 3 capacity disks, 1 cache disk. So there is redundancy inside the host. So if we do lose a caching disk or any other disk for that matter, the horsepower of the environment doesn't immediately get impacted. You are able to define whatever failures to tolerate you're comfortable with, 1 failure to tolerate, 2, etc. And like with any vSAN environment, be it running within your data center or here, you need to maintain 25% spare capacity for vSAN operations. And then out of the gate, the cluster is encrypted. That vSAN data store is encrypted. Okay, so networking and securities. NSXT is the mechanism in the solution being used to power the VM workloads. But, and this is a very important point, there is no requirement for NSXT within your data center, and nor is there going to be a need for you to be a NSX expert. What's going to be delivered is you can manage the NSX networks through a simplified UI in the Azure portal. So you want to create a network, you go in, create your network, and then it is made available to you on your DVSs inside the cluster. So that's something that we do get some concerns from customers that they don't have NSX knowledge, they don't have NSX within their data center. That is absolutely fine, not a requirement for either. There's connectivity to Azure from on-prem networks via ExpressRoute. We'll talk about that in a lot more detail later, because networking really is I don't want to say the most complicated part, but definitely something that is different than the environment, the current VMware environment you have within your data center. Edge services are made available through NSX, VPN, public IP, internet, etc. Of course, microsegmentation and service insertion, some of the core components of NSX, are made available to you. You do not have to use that, but those features are there for you to take advantage of. Another solution component is VMware HCX. This is not as a well-known product or solution as the others we've been talking about, so I'm going to spend a little bit more time talking about this. So what can HCX do, or how can it assist in your migration from your on-premises data center to AVS. There's definitely a lot of benefit to this solution, and it is bundled in as part of AVS. So what can you do? If you want to or need to move workloads, but you simply can't change the IP now, or you simply can't change the IP or don't want to change the IP, you can extend the layer 2 network to AVS. What that'll allow you to do is take your workloads, move them from your on-premises data center up to AVS with absolutely zero change whatsoever. No IP addressing. The security posture is going to be the same. Everything is going to be identical because it is just an extension of the existing network into Azure. So if you once you do extend that layer 2 network, you can then vMotion those workloads live, no downtime from your data center into AVS. Typically, though, customers are not going to move 500 VMs serially by vMotioning them. So what customers will do, even if it's on the same layer 2 extended network, they will do a large-scale bulk migrations. And essentially what that does is it replicates your VMs in large groups, keeps them in sync from on-premises and AVS. Essentially think about disaster recovery, right? The VMs are being at a block level being synchronized. That's exactly what's happening here. And then when you want to fail and you want to move those VMs over to AVS, you do that with some downtime. Essentially, the VMs go through a reboot plus a little bit of time to catch up any block changes that need to be caught up. So either way you want to do it or need to do it, no downtime, same network, or a little bit of downtime, same network, or brand new network, change the IP and migrate it over with bulk migration. Whatever suits your needs. And typically what we'll see is there'll be a handful of VMs customers will do with vMotion, and then the rest will be bulk migrated. So one really under-publicized thing about HCX is the WAN optimization. So there is WAN optimization in this tunnel going from your data center into AVS. So that vMotion, that bulk migration, and the moving of those blocks does get WAN optimized, compressed, deduped, things like that. You don't need to be on the latest and greatest vSphere 5.5 or above. You can take advantage of HCX. HCX is not only a migration solution, but it also provides disaster recovery features. So if you were consuming AVS for disaster recovery needs, you can leverage HCX to be that engine that does keep those VMs in sync and then does the failover if and when needed. All those features that I've been talking about is all available in HCX Advanced. If you had a need to or a want to, you will have the ability to upgrade to Enterprise, HCX Enterprise, and that gives you a few more features that people like. This is 3 of the most popular features that drive people to upgrading to HCX Enterprise. So replicated assisted vMotion. So what is that? It's essentially bulk migration with no downtime. So we are keeping the blocks in sync, or HCX is keeping the blocks in sync, and then when it's time, you'll vMotion those VMs over, no downtime, but you can do it in larger chunks and no downtime. Mobility groups, logical groupings, of VMs, and then you can monitor and manage those groupings as an entity. And then if you if you have VMware work, or if you have workloads that you want to move to AVS that are not running on vSphere, you could do OS assisted migration. And those OS assisted migration is essentially you would put an agent inside the operating system, and then you'd be able to migrate that to AVS. So where are the lines drawn between what you, the customer, has to take care of and what we, Microsoft, take care of? I'm not going to go through this in a gory level of details, but essentially, Microsoft is taking care of the deployment and the life cycle. And what does that mean? So all the components that we've been talking about, hardware all the way up to and including the VMware software that we've been talking about, all gets deployed and then maintained, patched, updated. Something, hardware fails, hardware gets replaced, etc., all by Microsoft. From a configuration perspective, you, the consumer of this service, do have the ability to configure NSX as you like, identity management, vSAN or VSAN. You are turning those knobs. You are using that as if it was your on-premises data center and cluster. You still have the ability to turn those knobs of those solutions. And then, of course, guest OS, everything with the guest OS and above is on the consumer of AVS. All right, we kind of talked about this before, but here it all is in a nice, summarized package slide. So benefits that you're going to get with Microsoft and not other hyperscalers is extended security updates for Windows Server and SQL Server 2008. So if you have those workloads running on your VMware environment within your data center, you have a couple options. You can just forego any type of security updates or support. You could pay Microsoft for extended support, or just move those workloads to AVS, and then the extended support comes along for the ride. So hybrid use benefit, that is where you're able to, you would have to talk to your specific account team in more detail and see if you have this available based on however you buy Microsoft licensing. But simply put, hybrid use benefit allows you to leverage licenses that you already have and are consuming within your data center, and also take advantage of those licenses inside of Azure. And because AVS is nothing more than just another Azure service, right? You are able to apply those hybrid use benefits when leveraging AVS. Also, there's a few ways you can consume AVS in terms of purchase model. So you could do an hourly pay-as-you-go. You could do just as a pay-as-you-go month by month, or you could do 1 or 3 year reserved instances. Obviously, the more of a year reservation, the higher the discounts. But you can find all that information on from your Microsoft account person. All right, so now the fun stuff, the real detailed network architecture. So as I had said before, the network architecture is something that's going to vary. And what I've found when working with VMware customers is that this is the part that is most unique and requires most conversation and most whiteboarding, if you will, and it has a lot more variables. So I'm just going to walk you through the typical customer and the typical networking setup. So on your screen now, what do you see? You see a cloud, which is representative of Azure, an Azure subscription, and at the bottom of that cloud is the Azure services, all the Azure services that are there today. So what does a typical customer have? They have their data center with vCenter, storage network, vSphere. They have a router. That router is connecting to an express route or provides some level of connectivity into Azure. And that connection then terminates into an Azure VNet. So what you see on your screen now is the customer able to go across their express route, get to Azure, and then consume Azure services. Okay, so now AVS comes in. So AVS is stood up, and because it is bare metal infrastructure, right, it's stood up in a slightly different way inside of Azure. So now what you see on your screen is now the customer has deployed AVS. They've stood up the environment. So in this, what you see in this screen is AVS is stood up, it's running, and it's fully operational inside of Azure, but there is no network connectivity going to it. So essentially it's this nice island just floating out there with no way to get to. So what do we do? So at this point, what we do is we connect up an express route into typically the same VNet where your on-premises express route is coming into. So now what you see here is now we have connectivity from that VNet, the Azure VNet in the lower right-hand corner here. So we have connectivity from here across and into AVS. But we do not have connectivity from here all the way through. That's because this is non-transitive. It is not, you cannot ride this connection to get over to AVS. So what do? We implement something called Global Reach. So Global Reach then is the bridge that allows us to share BGP routes between your data center and AVS and your data center. So now in this picture here, BGP routes are being shared between all entities, all three entities here. So AVS now knows where your native Azure networks are. AVS knows where and how to get to your networks inside your data center, and vice versa. Your VNet knows how to get to or VNet, and a lot of times there'll be multiple VNets off of this VNet over here to get to AVS, et cetera, et cetera. So these three pods, if you will, are able to communicate. This global reach and this connection here is riding the Azure backbone. So extremely high, low latent, high speed. All right, so the route that things take. So when you have a workload inside of AVS and it wants to talk to your data center or vice versa, this green line is the route it takes. So you'll notice it doesn't hairpin to this VNet, which is good. So it's very, very high speed, low latency connectivity. Okay, you want to talk to your VNet or things inside your VNet. You may have virtual machines in here. You may be wanting AVS to get to other Azure services here. So what it does is it leaves the AVS environment, rides the Azure backbone over to your VNet to get the resources that it needs, either in your VNet or within or other Azure services. Now, of course, most AVS environments are going to need internet access. So they're off of your VNet, you will then access the internet. So if you want to ride, if any of these VMs here need to get to the internet, or things on the internet need to get to AVS, they will ride across this connection here. So this is by no means 100% every customer is like this, but this is the typical customer, and the vast majority of this is going to be accurate for a large percentage of the customers out there. So I think what I would like for you to take from this is that AVS plugs into your existing data center, your other Azure services that you're using now or would use later, etc. It is a very seamless integration and within your current architecture. So we talked about HCX. So how does HCX flow? So once we have the networking all configured, we would build a connection for HCX between the HCX appliances. There's some appliances that live inside of AVS. There's others that will live inside your data center, and an IPsec tunnel is built, and across that network infrastructure, and that green line that you see here on the screen is really just, or the green piping is representing that IPsec tunnel that HCX leverages. Okay, so the deployment does, while it is fast, it definitely is going to take longer than the next few minutes that we have in this session. So I wanted to show you how the deployment looks. So you, the customer, would go into your Azure portal. You would choose Azure VMware Solution Service, and then you would be presented with this one screen. That's it, just one screen. And you fill this out, and then the deployment begins. So let's kind of just walk through these items. So first, you're going to be asked for what subscription do you want to deploy this to, what resource group, and what region. So you choose those. In this example, it shows East US, but it could be anywhere in the world. Then, once you've identified that, put in a friendly name for the resource. This is something you're going to see in Azure. Then you're going to choose the node size and how many nodes or how many hosts do you want. So you would choose the node size from the dropdown, then use the slider to go from 3 up to 16. Here, what you're being asked for is, I know there's 4 lines and it may be a little hard to see, but you're being asked for 2 pieces of information. What is the password that you want to use for vCenter, and what is the password you want to use for NSX? Admin console, and there's 4 because you're being asked to confirm the password. And then finally, the network address block. So clearly, when these clusters are deployed, when vMotion networks are set up, there needs to be a network or networks that are used to do this. So what we ask is a /22 network block, and then what we do is we start chopping that 22 network into multiple other networks that will be used for the overall infrastructure. All right, so now the environment is up. We kind of talked about leveraging other Azure services to augment and to complement the AVS environment. So this is by no means an exhaustive list. These are just a couple of examples that we're seeing to be low-hanging fruit in terms of providing value and quick value for the customer who's bringing their workloads to AVS. So we're seeing some AVS customers leverage file sync and Azure Blob Storage. So essentially what this does, Azure Files, Azure File Sync, think of OneDrive, but for a file server. So you can really shrink the amount of consumption of storage space of a file server by leveraging Azure Files, Azure File Sync. Your file server will still be located inside of vSphere, and nothing changes with it other than there will be it'll be backed by native Azure storage. Additionally, we have certified Microsoft Azure Backup for AVS, and there is actually in the, if you were to go to the link that I'm going to show you in one of the last or the second to last slide for other resources, there's a blog article that was written that you can check out. So targeted compliance in the general availability timeframe for AVS.next, we are targeting these certifications at the time of AVS.next release. I wanted to take you through a live look at AVS, and so what you see here on the screen is the Azure portal, right? Some of you, or most of you, may be familiar with this. Right here, we see the icon for Azure VMware Solutions. If you don't have it, you would just search for it. There it is. You would select it. Now, what you see here is all the private clouds, AVS private clouds that are deployed. So essentially, in each one of these, there is a at minimum 3-node cluster, at maximum 4 16-node clusters. But certainly, your environment would not look like this. You would have, you know, a handful, 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe of these. So let's go to my particular private cloud. So this is probably how your environment would look. You would see 1 or 2 of them listed here. So let's drill into this one. So what you see here is this is the essentially your overview, your summary screen, and some of the network information that we use to get this environment stood up, the region that it's in, the subscription ID, what resource group this vSphere cluster resides in, and how many hosts. Here, the cluster is called Cluster 1, and there are 4 hosts in this cluster. So here, if we look in this connectivity tab, and I'm not going to, we just simply don't have the time to go through all these tabs, but I'm going to focus on some of the more highly used ones. So here, what we see is we have a workload network which is created /24. So that /22 has been chopped into multiple 24. A vMotion network here, and the management network. Internet is either enabled or disabled. You do not have to give these this environment access to the internet. You can enable or disable here. Here is where your authorization keys get requested. So why would you do this? If you think back to that those network diagrams, what this is allowing is that connectivity from AVS into that VNet, which then allows you to talk to all your on-premises data center and other Azure resources. So here, if we look at our identity, here's the IP address of vCenter, username for vCenter. Here is the admin password. You can just copy it here, and same for NSX. Here we can take a look at our clusters, get a little more detail here. All right, cluster 1, as I said, 4 hosts, and this is simply just showing that it succeeded. I do not have more quota to be able to deploy more hosts because this is an internal lab environment. But if you did have more, if this was your production environment and you wanted to add hosts, this is where you would do it. You would scale that up and hit save, and then new hosts would be added to the cluster, this existing cluster. Okay, so now let's go back to identity and let's get the vCenter web client URL. So let's take that URL or the IP address, and now we're gonna go to it. Now, this is all gonna look all too familiar to everybody on this call or on this webinar. So we will into vCenter. I got some memory issues here. I've been doing some nested virtualization stuff, so that's what was causing that. So in any case, you can see here, here's my cluster. Here's my 4 ESX hosts. There is, you know, there's really nothing to show here. Besides, this is what you use every day. Let me show you the networking though. So here, you see these networks here. I've created all of these, and all of these networks are created in NSX, and then these DVSs are automatically provisioned, and then you can put your VMs on these networks. So like in any other VMware environment, you create networks, those networks get delivered to these DVSs, and you attach VMs to them. Alternatively, you can stretch layer 2 networks with HCX. What you'll notice here also too, speaking of HCX, is HCX is already deployed in this environment, and you see here that I have it paired up already, and been doing some testing with some migrations. So that was Azure VMware solution. I appreciate everybody's time. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me directly. There's some contact info. These 2 URLs will bring you to the documentation. The other will take you to some blog articles about AVS. And I'm just kind of talking a bit slow here just to give everybody an opportunity to take a screenshot or write this down. So again, thank you very much for your time today, and hope to work with some or all of you in the near future. Thanks.